Welcome to the Stranger Than Fiction Podcast Episode 6. I'm your host, Patrick Meekin. I'm the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street. Both books tell terrifying true stories of spiritual warfare and paranormal activity, but most importantly, deliverance from the spirits of darkness. Both books are available at Amazon.com. And, I try to get really relevant hosts onto the program, and tonight we have a great guest tonight on the program. Bill Bean, he is a reverend. He was featured on an episode of A Haunting. I believe the episode was called House of the Dead, if I remember correctly. But I want to say very quickly, Bill is a stand-up guy. When I first started writing 225th Street, I believe it was 2010, I'd reached out to Bill just because he was experienced with writing and sharing these kinds of stories. He was very gracious to me, actually sent me a PDF copy of his book to help me. He's just a stand-up individual. He has taken his experiences and now is helping others by ministering deliverance to them. So, Bill, thank you for being on the program tonight. It's an honor to have you on.
It's my honor and pleasure, Brother Patrick. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So kind of start us at the beginning. I'm very familiar with your story, but it's fascinating. And I know people who find themselves in the situations that you found yourself in, and unfortunately, I found myself in before. You kind of don't know where to turn. So if you can kind of start us at the beginning.
Yeah, it's been an amazing journey. It's just absolutely miraculous in every sense of the word. I can never thank God and praise Him enough for saving me, for delivering me and transforming my life from victim to victor. So it all started when now I've written 10 books, and in the first book, Dark Force, I say that it started when my family and I moved into a 3-bedroom ranch style home located in Glen Burnie, Maryland, in a community called Herondale. But it actually goes much further back than that. I found additional information out after writing that first book that two family members as far back as well over 100 years ago actually conjured up demonic forces through ritual invocation, and those demons did come on the family, created a variety of catastrophes and damages on both sides of the family. And so I've often said that yes, evil was already present and manifest in the house and in the area, but I feel that my parents were guided to that home and area by the demonic forces that were conjured up in order to merge together with the other demonic entities that were already present and manifest. And that's why it was so severe for my family and I, because we were caught in the middle of this perfect storm of evil. So it was hellish. It truly was, Patrick. The house was located at the bottom of a downhill cul-de-sac, and I was 4 years old when we moved in there. My sister was 13. And we both were frightened. We just, we could feel the evil there. The house was in a semi-dilapidated condition. And again, located at the bottom of a downhill cul-de-sac with a very large and long and deep ravine behind the house. And my dad, William Bean Sr., was a master carpenter, and he saw it as a restoration project, which he did. Did restore it, made it look very nice. But right from the very beginning, it just had such an ominous look and feel about it. And then when you entered in, it was equally as ominous and foreboding on the inside. The house was very dark. It had dark brown paneling, which almost looked black in color on the walls. You would enter in through the living room, and there was this coat closet that was, when you opened the door, it was right there on 2 wooden sliding doors. And then you would go into the living room, and you would make a right down a long hallway, which had this hard tiled floor. You would be in bed at night and hear these heavy footsteps coming down the hallway from sounded like boots or hard-soled shoes reverberating off the walls. And my brother and I shared the first room on the right. My parents' room was the second room on the right, and my sister's room was across the hallway, last room on the left. And that is the room where I believe the main portals existed in her closet, which was adjacent to a linen closet at the end of the hallway. And I believe those were the two main portals in the home, and evil was coming and going through there on a regular basis. My sister's room was the room that was absolutely frigid most times, even on the warmest of summer days. And it's also the room where the door would open and slam for many repetitions at a time. My mother, Patricia Bean, was the first to have an experience, supernatural experience in the house. It had taken place while she was unpacking and organizing. My dad had taken us with him for the day to allow her to have some peace, what they thought would be peace, while she was doing this. Mm-hmm. And so she was alone in the house when this happened. And she felt a presence come into the room. She was right in the middle of working. And she thought in her mind initially that it was my dad who would come back in and maybe play a joke on her, try and scare her. Mm-hmm. As she spun around, anticipating on seeing him, and to her shock, no one or nothing was there. So she was quite unnerved by it. She eventually was able to collect herself and go back to doing what she was doing. And then my sister's bedroom door slammed shut by itself. And that was enough to make her go outside and wait until we return. So that's where it started. Mm-hmm. And then it gradually escalated with more of these types of events and supernatural occurrences. And it all makes sense to me, because when the devil starts his stronghold and he sends demons in to a situation, and whether it's a person or a family, these little parlor tricks will start to take place. And it's all designed to put the person in fear and confusion.
That's right.
And once you've established that, now you've lowered the frequency and vibration, and you're wide open and vulnerable for demonic attack. And that's exactly what was taking place. And this ultimately escalated into violent physical attacks on my mother, myself, and other family members from these demonic entities. In my mother's case, it continued with her up until the day of her tragic passing in 1981. And for me, it happened between ages 5 and 12.
It's a long time to go through that.
Yeah, it was horrific. It really was. And miraculous in the same sense that I believe that God had a calling for my life before I came into this world. And no man is better than another, but some people have greater and bigger callings.
Yeah.
And so I do believe that God had this calling all my life. And I also believe that the devil's trying to kill me before I could get to where God wanted and needed me to be.
Yep. I think that happens a lot. I really do. And it is funny how generational curses will play into other situations in your life to basically set you up and lead you into places where he can hopefully, and on his part, he wants to destroy you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And so it continued with these types of occurrences. And then my parents, they were married in 1956. And by all accounts, were a happily married couple. Mm-hmm. My sister, she was born in 1957. Another child was born in 1963. It was a male child, and he died under very mysterious circumstances. He didn't live for very long at all. Mm-hmm. And the story that I got, and there were conflicting stories, and I never could get to the bottom of it. But one story says that the child lived for several days, died, and then representatives from Johns Hopkins Hospital came and removed the child's body for studies. Mm-hmm. What that means, I have no idea, but that's what I was told. And then I was born in 1966, and my brother was born in 1969. Mm-hmm. Back then, families had parties and these gatherings, and mm-hmm. people drank and smoked. And so my parents were social drinkers, mm-hmm. and they were smokers as well. Mm-hmm. And they would have these family parties in the beginning. And I noticed as the activity continued to escalate that my father, William Bean Sr., who was a very rugged individual, he was a contractor, he was a man's man, a tough guy, and mm-hmm. Was certainly always in charge.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't tell us but he did confide in my mother's mother, Dora Harvey, my beloved grandmother, Dora Harvey, who was no longer with us. He confided in her that he too was having these supernatural occurrences and seeing these manifestations, and was actually physically attacked on one occasion. And I didn't find that out until maybe about 5 years ago from my brother. I had no idea. So my father, and I'm not making excuses for his behavior, but I'm trying to rationalize it. And he was a good man that made horrible mistakes in his life. And the devil was right there to aid and abet in every one of those bad choices. And so I believe that he was so confounded in his mind that he was in a situation that he could not control. My parents believed in God, but we did not have any faith-based upbringing. We never attended church, never baptized, nothing. And so he wasn't going to go to the church. You didn't have paranormal investigation groups, back then, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway. He wouldn't have involved them anyhow. So he found himself in a situation that he couldn't control, and I think that it confounded him so much that he literally tried to escape reality through the escalation of alcohol abuse. And so, they went from social drinkers to now all of a sudden he becomes this raging alcoholic who begins to physically abuse my mother on a regular basis between 1973 and 1975, nearly killed her on several occasions, Patrick. I can recall being 8 years old, having to run next door to get the police called on my father because he was absolutely killing my mother. I saw so much bloodshed in that house over the years. And I do believe that when my father was under the influence of alcohol, these demonic forces were able to fuel and intensify his rage against my mother. And it is a miracle that he didn't kill her. And so he left us in 1975. I was 9 years old, and he left us in such a bad way that we didn't have any money. My mother was very ill the entire time that we lived there. So she had developed high blood pressure, which led to a series of strokes, which ultimately led to kidney failure. She was very, very sick. She couldn't work. We had to go on welfare. It was just absolutely horrible. So now, not only do you have the supernatural aspects of things taking place with these attacks, but now you have a tremendous financial burden that only adds to the myriad of problems that are taking place in the home. And yes, and so it had gotten so bad that when my dad had left, my mother came under regular physical attack from several of these demonic entities, and it got so bad that she couldn't even sleep in her bed anymore. She had to sleep in with my brother and I. And what I failed to mention also is that in 1973, my sister ran away from home, married a young man in the neighborhood, and she stated in the haunting episode that she would have married anybody just to get out of there. She could not be there any longer. And another interesting thing is that my mother's firstborn male child died. And then my sister was pregnant with a male child, and the baby died inside of her, and it almost killed her. It poisoned her system and it almost killed her. So that's another interesting, and one more interesting side note is that my mother, Patricia Bean, died on October 5th, 1981. And 10 years to the day of the death of my Aunt Colleen Bean. She was the wife of my father's brother, Clifford Bean. She had died on October 5th, 1971 while giving birth. And she had developed sepsis from a medical instrument being left inside of her, and she died. So there's a lot of, correlations here. And boy, oh boy. So A Haunting aired that story on September 6th or September 7th, 2006. And that's what put me on the map. And it got international attention. Then the book Dark Force came out. And so that's what really started it all for me. I was just a guy with a story to tell. And So it wasn't until sometime later that I really was sincere in wanting to make God first in my life, and wanting a fresh new start and a clean slate. And I wanted Jesus in my life to guide me on that narrow path back to the Father. And so my wife and I decided that we were going to do that, and we got baptized together. And it was the greatest decision that I ever made in my life. And then the blessings started to come in, and it was gradual. It was because when I have to tell you, from everything that took place, from that point onward, and then the tragedies that took place, I was a very bitter and empty and angry young man filled with rage. I drank, I did drugs, I was violent, grew up on the streets, hung out with some of the worst people. Most of those people are dead and in prison now. I could have been there myself. And so I went through all those things and developed behavioral patterns that were not good, that's for sure. And so it's very difficult, even though we might say, oh, we want to be saved, we want to start a brand new chapter and a brand new season. That's easier said than done, because when you've developed those behavioral patterns, it's very difficult to break. And that's where real faith comes in, to where we have to trust in God to break that off of us. We have to do our part as well. And in my case, it was 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward. And that was the process for a while. But once I got there, I never looked back. And today, as we speak about these things, it's almost like it happened to somebody else. I'm so far removed from it. So little did I know that, started doing all these interviews really back in 1996. But then the national and international attention came after the haunting episode in 2006. And so that, again, is what put me on the map. And so I started telling my story, giving up teen interviews. I've given over 2,500 media interviews in my career. And sometimes it was 4 and 5 interviews a day. It was madness. And that went on for years. And so once I had established myself as some type of public figure, people started coming to me, sending me their messages, telling me their stories, telling me, how they were suffering. And I thought to myself, well, what can I do? There's nothing I could do to help these people. I still felt like I wasn't all the way there myself yet, that I was still, having issues and struggles. And, but it's amazing what God does, because I had no idea, because I never, ever in a million years would have chosen this type of work. Never. And so once I became free, and we had that baptism, and then not only did I work on changing my behavioral habits and patterns, but then I engaged in studies, because unfortunately, tragedies did occur. And when my mom passed, I was a very young boy, just had gotten into teenage years. And I had to quit school in the 8th grade. I lied about my age, and I went to work for a construction company. I had to grow up very, very quickly. I was paying room and board as a young boy, just $40 a week. And that was a lot of money back then, just to live somewhere. And I was working, and I was paying my way. And so I had all this stuff thrust upon me. My beloved grandmother died first, Dora Harvey. She died from a sudden series of heart attacks. And then 2 months and 2 days later, my beloved mother, Patricia Bean, died from a cerebral hemorrhage at age 44. So they were the 2 closest people to me in my life at that time. They were suddenly gone. And my dad, William Bean Sr., when he left us, he moved to Florida. He went to work with my Uncle Clifford. He too is a contractor, so they did a lot of work down there in Florida. And he ended up shot to death at age 48. So neither of my parents lived to see the age of 50. And we had many, many other family tragedies throughout the years, throughout the course of everything. And so, again, that was part of my behavioral problems, is being in pain and having that type of rage and bitterness as well. And so it took a while to reconcile that, but I found that the more real and authentic that I was with God, and in my faith, the more blessings and transformation seem to be coming my way.
Yep.
So as part of this, I decided not only to make God first in my life, but then to dedicate myself to studies. I studied the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a big difference between reading the Bible and studying the Bible.
That's for sure.
And I spent years in serious biblical studies, studied ancient religion, ancient history, you name it. So I felt so intellectually inadequate for so many years, Patrick. But I have to tell you, it was a great feeling that what God led me into this new chapter, new season.
Yep.
I felt empowered that, knowledge is power. And
yes.
so the more that I came to know, the wiser that I, had become. Yep. And God has blessed me with wisdom and knowledge far beyond anything that I could ever imagine in my life. So it just started to go into these good patterns and these good steps forward.
Yeah.
And then I felt like God was putting a calling on my life to help people. And at first I thought, no, he must have a sense of humor. How could someone like me be a help to anybody? How can I do anything for anybody? And that held me back for a while. But the calling was every day when I woke up. Throughout the day, it was the last thing I thought of before I went to sleep. So it was real and authentic. Yeah. And so then I became a non-denomination ordained minister and started where before people would contact me for help and I would try and connect them with other people that I thought could help them.
Yeah.
Well, when they started contacting me for help, then I felt confident enough and in the right state of mind spiritually and faith-wise to answer this call and to know that God would work through me to help these people. So, in all of my interviews and appearances, and yes, it started with that A Haunting and Coast to Coast and all this stuff. And I've been in 9 episodes or 10 of A Haunting now because they brought me back for my case files. And so, where it started with my own story, then they started bringing me back for other people's stories and the involvement that I had in those cases. And it's just absolutely miraculous and astounding. So I'll never forget it. The first family that I went to in Maryland, they had a severe demonic problem. And I could feel the presence of evil. And yet at the same time, I had this knowing and maybe confirmation might be a better word that this was absolutely what I'm supposed to be doing, that God has called me to do this. And it was really, even though I was in a bad situation with this family being immersed in evil, it was a great feeling at the same time because it was confirmation from God that he truly had called me to do this work. And then from there, it's just sort of been a blur. I mean, there's been so many people, not only in America, but in 54 other countries and counting as well. And that in itself is miraculous. And in all the interviews, you could listen to every interview that I've ever given. You would never, ever hear me give anything to myself. I am a vessel that God works through, and it ends right there. He deserves all the praise and the thanks and the credit and the glory for everything that he does. I can't do anything without him, but with him working through me, he's done extraordinary things in helping other people.
Yeah, there's so many things that are coming to mind as you're speaking. Number one, I think it's funny. I'm looking at you and you have dumbbells on your one side and your guitar's behind you.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt in my mind you're called into this ministry. And it's funny. Those are the same things I like. I love music. I love lifting weights, and it's something, I don't know. I think there's certain things that God puts into certain people that are called to this. The other thing is Satan will try to take you out before it can ever begin. But God's sitting there saying, I know the beginning from the end. I know the end from the beginning. I know what I'm going to do through this. You're going to learn through this. I'm going to anoint you through this. And I'm going to deliver you through this. And then guess what? You're going to go out and you're, just like when Jesus would save somebody, what's he do? He wants them to be a disciple,
Correct. It's absolutely right. And it is so miraculous. And it is so, I can't describe in words the feeling that I get when I know that God has actually worked through me to help somebody and help them to be free from evil and then help them to move forward, putting a game plan together for their life.
Yep.
So they could keep all those doors closed and move forward in peace, freedom, and victory.
It is humbling because we know in ourselves, like, no matter how many victories we may have in our life, we know we're flawed. We just do. We know we are. We know we're not perfect. That's why, we have to you always be seeking Christ. But when God uses you, it's so humbling. Like, man, God used me to do that. I can't believe that.
It's astounding. It really is. I mean, there's times that my mouth would just be open, just going into a situation that was so bad. And I've been in many life-threatening situations throughout my life, many before becoming this spiritual warrior, and many in going to help people.
Yep.
I've had people that wanted to shoot me, stab me, have tried to do so, tried to slice me with a shard of glass, bite me, kick me, punch me, spit on me, you name it. I mean, it's all happened.
There will be hits put on you to try to stop you. There's no way. I've experienced that. I get it. And it sounds crazy. I always save every bit of evidence because I know the things I say sound crazy. But it's like, no, I can prove it. If I'm going to say it, I'm going to prove it.
You're absolutely right. And, the devil does not want men that God will work through to help people. He wants everybody to be in bondage. He wants everybody to be enslaved. And he wants everybody to be in that state of trauma and fear that he could continue to press the buttons and manipulate. And it's just like the person might as well have shackles and chains on.
Absolutely. Another thing you said is about with the day when you made your decision and you got baptized and everything. And when that happened to me, the day I got saved, my one aunt, who was a church organist, wonderful Christian lady, and I'll never forget, I'd gone to the altar, and she came up to me and she said, this was after I was praying, and she said, you just made a decision that you will never regret.
Yep.
That's the thing. You never will.
You can never make a better decision in your life, because when we're real and authentic with God, and then when we choose to come back to him, making him first, and then wanting Jesus to be in our life, there's nothing greater than that. And so that's where the real blessings come upon us. And for those of you out there who may be on the fence in your faith, and you might be having an issue or a problem trying to understand what Patrick and I are saying here, read Deuteronomy 28. Just start there. And that'll give you the blessings if you hearken on to the voice of God and have a real and authentic relationship with him. Or if you choose not to, well, then there's going to be curses involved in that as well, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And so, everything that we're saying here, there's no exaggeration. This is the truth. It may sound stranger than fiction, but I'll tell you one thing, or stranger, the fiction may sound stranger than the truth, but this is the truth. And the truth really is stranger than fiction sometimes.
That's right.
Because God makes the impossible possible. I've seen impossible things that he has done, that he's made manifest. And you go, how is that possible? That's impossible. He can't do that. And yet he does it.
Another thing, I have to tell you this too. In 2006, when that episode aired, I was in a very messed up situation living in Holmes County, and my first of two back-to-back hauntings that were completely unrelated, and I was so desperate. Like me and my ex-wife built a house. The house was so haunted, it wasn't funny. I was like, how can this be? We built the house, But one thing, this is going to sound strange, but we would watch Ghost Hunters. We would watch A Haunting, because at least it confirmed that this stuff really does happen to normal people who are sane. These things really do happen. And I remember seeing your episode. I remember that plain as day in 2006. And, it did speak to me, because it was like, this stuff is real. It absolutely is. And I know in your book, you have some pictures of some of the entities that actually, you had an extreme haunt. There were things manifesting in multiple ways in that situation.
Yeah. And, when it gets to the point of physical attack from these entities, you're in a bad way.
Absolutely.
You're in an absolute bad way. And so, I've got lots of photos of things like that. And, thinking back, and like you just said about you being in a bad situation, seeing me on that episode Well, over the years, there have been other people that have been in similar bad situations, and some were considering suicide, and they happened to be flipping through the channels and saw me on one of those programs and reached out, and God worked through me to help that person. Another miracle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny, and again, what the devil means for bad, God will use for good.
Yes.
He'll oppress you to the point. I mean, I understand how people could be suicidal, because he will oppress you to the point that you can't think straight, that you can barely see the light of day if you do at all, because it's like nothing's ever going to change. Nothing's ever going to get better. It keeps getting worse. And in my situation, it's really strange. I started actually doing deliverance ministry but I was still stuck in my own nightmare. But I knew people would come to me that needed help, and I had started studying, and I was like, man, I think they got demons, and but I would go home then, and imagine you go and you cast demons out of someone, and once you've experienced that, it's not fake, it's real. The Bible's more real on a completely different level. But then I'm back in this house where I can't get the stuff to leave my house. What in the world? I remember sleeping with a Bible open on my chest, because I was like, oh boy, I cast demons out of somebody, and now I'm in this environment where these things hate me probably worse than they did yesterday. And and I don't know what to do. And it came down to I had to find out why the place was haunted, what caused it, and then deal with it, But of course, it all comes down to doing that in Jesus' name.
And you have peace now, right? Everything's good and peaceful. Praise God.
I mean, I go through attacks when I help others. I go through attacks when I write my books. I will have, I'll be honest, a lot of attacks come through people. And it's people that have issues. And sometimes I have little paranormal things here and there, especially when I'm writing. But it is what it is. We're in a battle. We're in a war, actually.
What I would suggest to you, Patrick, and I'll send these to you after the show.
Okay.
I say this it's on my website, BillJBean.com. It's under prayers to God.
Okay.
I say these prayers every single day of my life, and will continue to do so for the rest of my life. So the first thing that I do when I wake up, and I don't even get to bed before 6:30 a.m. every morning. Wow. So, some days I sleep to 10 or 10:30. And if I can, some days I'll sleep to 12 or 12:30. But then it starts all over again. But the first thing I do when I open my eyes is I thank God and praise God for the day. Life is a gift. We are not promised tomorrow, so we should thank him and praise him for every single day. And I do that every day, and will continue to do that in every day for the rest of my life. Then I get on my knees and I pray. I declare victory in each and every day. I thank God and praise God for everything that he's done, for everything that he's doing, and for everything that he's going to do for me. And I visualize giant warrior angels surrounding me at all times. And so then I keep a dialogue with God throughout the day. Before I go to bed every morning, I say a spiritual warfare prayer. And if I feel the presence of evil, then I will take if something manifested right here, right now, I jump out of this chair and I would engage it spiritually, binding and rebuking and casting it out. So I would say, Yahweh, rebuke thee in Yahshua, Jesus the Christ's name, depart, and be authoritative. And that stuff's gone like a shot. So I will send those if you're interested.
Absolutely.
I'll send them to you, and may they be a blessing to you. But I don't want you to ever have any type of, and look, we're all going to have issues and situations in life. Believe me, like you said, the devil especially hates people like us. But we have to be ready, and we have to be strong in mind, body, and spirit. And yes, that's why the weights are back there. I've got to be strong in mind, body, and spirit each and every day of my life. And same with you having weights and then guitars and things of that nature. I speak about this a lot. I have a little show it's really more of a service than a show. It's called Warrior Mode. And last night I was speaking about the power of music. And so music was designed to worship our creator, Yahweh Elohim. So Satan was the choir director. He held a very, very high and important position in heaven. And so now, of course, with his fall, the music has been corrupted. And so I always warn people, that the devil is the prince and the power of the air, which means the airwaves, and
Yep.
he can manipulate and take advantage of certain frequencies and vibrations. Furthermore, demons can infiltrate through the airwaves.
Yes.
So we must be on guard for this
Yes.
all the time.
Yes.
And so I warn people about these things, and I also present to them types of music that we can listen to, certainly starting with praise and worship music.
Yeah.
And then there are other types of music as well that have high frequency and high vibration. All life is based on this. And I'll tell you why, because Yahweh spoke the world into existence through his voice, which is frequency and vibration. So the whole world operates on that right there, on that principle. And so we have to be aware of these things. And if we are certainly giving him praise through praise and worship music, and then other music that raises the frequency and vibration. I'll give you another, for instance, church bells. You never hear church bells ringing anymore, and that's for a reason. Because church bells raise the frequency and vibration. And now we live in this sin-filled, fallen world that the devil's in control of, that he wants to eliminate things that can raise the frequency and vibration.
Yeah, and that's one of the most beautiful sounds too, the church bells ringing out in the town.
Of course, and it's empowering. It lifts us. And so the devil does not want this. You'll be hard-pressed to find church bells anywhere anymore, certainly in America.
Unfortunately.
And, unfortunately. And there is something also to, and I'm not New Age at all, but what I am is a truth seeker. And God has led me to many truths, and I believe that he's led me to this as well. Like those Tibetan monks with the bowls, those bowls that resonate. That is high frequency, high vibration. And again, I'm not telling you to go be a Tibetan monk or a New Ager or anything like that. But what I am saying is that there really is power in these frequencies and vibrations because they are of God. So therefore, anything of God is going to be good and it's going to be powerful.
It depends. People can use that for the bad and to summon demonic spirits.
You're right.
Or it can be good to move into a spirit of worship and basically like how would I say this, in harmony with God.
Patrick. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And you know, the other thing is that the Bible says we have the power of life and death in our tongue.
Correct.
So what we say is important, you know.
You better believe it. And so people don't realize that when they are, I had a family member do this to me as a young boy. When I quit school, I went to work for a construction company, and this family member said to me, "You'll never be in, and this is all you'll ever be." So instead of trying to motivate me to move forward, he was angry because, well, at that time, I was working. But I was also hanging out with some really bad people and drinking and doing drugs. So his anger towards me was, "You'll never be anything. You're just going to be this. You might even be a janitor one day," or something like that. And I really used that as a motivational tool that, now this person has pronounced a curse over me. So these are curse words. And we have to be aware of this. So when if you're out there and you're listening to this and you've had someone say it to you, or I hope you've never said it to someone else, but if you have, be aware, because these are real curse words that you can pronounce over somebody. And so be careful what you say. And Brother Patrick, you're absolutely right. The power of life and death is in the tongue. And when you say and pronounce these curses over someone like that, it's going to require that person to be very, very strong and very blessed and have the power of God to deliver and break those curses. Otherwise, that can develop into a pattern due to the curse that was pronounced over that person.
Absolutely. And, we can do it over ourselves when we're down and feeling bad and start talking and we end up pronouncing word curses over ourselves.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And, this is something that I think needs to be talked about more often because people just don't know. And furthermore, that goes for any type of teaching nowadays. People are so distracted, and this is for a reason. If you and I let's say we were in a room of 100 people and we were talking like this and other things, trying to educate people. They would think that we were talking a foreign language. They just most.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, if we said to those 100 people, can you tell us about the Kardashians? Or they could tell us everything.
Yep. Sports.
So, yeah, same thing. Sports. They could tell us everything. Yep. And so this is what the devil does. He's very clever at distracting people. And so he sort of blinds reality and blurs reality. Yeah. So when we as people become emotionally invested in someone or something, the devil's got us.
Yeah.
And so he uses all these tactics and all these different false idols to get the people worshiping. And that goes for some of the churches as well, because there are pastors out there and they know who they are. More importantly, God knows who they are.
Yeah.
They want the people to worship them.
Absolutely.
They're the entertainer. They are the focal point of everything. And therefore, the people are coming for that pastor, not to worship God.
Yeah. And generally, those pastors are not going to preach a lot of truth because they want to entertain the people.
You're right.
And the bottom line is, in reality, the way people grow is by being challenged. And, you know, there's a scripture about iron sharpening iron. And when you meet and you talk with other Christians that understand these things, you're sharpened. When you talk to other believers that believe in this and understand warfare, you are sharpened. And when you get around people that don't believe any of this and they don't talk about any of this and all that, and their life is on easy street because they're no threat to the devil, you become stagnant if you let that affect you.
And there's an old saying, if you're not being bothered by the devil, then he's got you right where he wants you.
That's right. That's right.
In today's churches, not all, I'm not condemning all, there's still some good churches out there, but they're becoming far fewer as these dens of inequities continue to manifest and increase. And I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. I've recently seen some things that I covered in headlines on my own little show that are just absolutely wickedness, that the church is bringing in wickedness and open praise to the devil. And therefore, if you're telling people that it's okay to sin and it's okay to do anything that you want to do because you're saved under grace, Jesus paid it all. So you don't have to do you don't have to make any effort. You just do you and you be you because it's already paid. And this is a lie from the pits of hell.
Right. That's and right. It's a seducing spirit.
Yep. And these people are buying it in droves because that's the easy way to worship. My pastor told me that I can do this or say that. We can do this, and it's okay because we're saved under grace. Well, read the book of James because James said faith without the works is dead. So you have to have both in order to be real. And there's a fine line and a balance.
Yeah, and it says that in the last days, many shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. That tells me doctrines of devils, doctrines in the church, you can live however you want, are from devils. And what kind of devils? Seducing spirits. So all these doctrines, any doctrine, and to me, it's any doctrine that tells you you don't have to worry about going to hell. You know, if for whatever reason, you don't have to, hell's, you're not going to go there or whatever, whether it be, annihilationism, or you can live how you want and still go to heaven if you said a prayer, or anything like that, or, we'll pray you out of hell or whatever. Guess what? All of that is seducing spirits and doctrines of devils.
And this goes a long way back. And boy, I'll tell you, I've seen some disturbing statements. Now, I'm not Catholic. I'm non-denomination. I have seen some disturbing statements coming out of the Catholic Church here recently. The Pope declaring that there's no such thing as hell. Hell is in the mind, and there's various forms of hell. When you've got somebody that holds this position. Now, I hold no reverence to him or for him in any way, shape, or form. But he is a supposed figure that has influence over probably a couple billion people. I mean, this guy is a very powerful individual. And when you're coming out and making statements like that, now you are leading people in that mindset that, hey, I can
Right.
do whatever I want because there is no hell. Pope said there's no hell.
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want to do. I'm okay.
Yep.
There's no hell.
You know, I mentioned on another episode recently that there was it's a Catholic relic. It's an inanimate object. It is used in their so-called mass, and it is used when they do their what is called transubstantiation, where it's like a cross with a circle in the middle of the cross, and they put a piece of bread in there, and they literally say hocus pocus in Latin, and they believe that piece of bread becomes Christ's real flesh, and then they eat it and all that. And that relic sets off an EMF detector, the same level that a microwave oven sets off an EMF detector.
Wow.
Why would an inanimate object do that? You know? And to me, like, I didn't get into a lot of detail when I mentioned it previously, but it's like that is part of a ceremony that is leading people to hell.
It's a summoning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're having these spirits manifest that would register in those fields, the microwave. Yeah, makes sense. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, for the electromagnetic field to spike when you hold that EMF detector near a relic that's used in religious ceremony, especially something that is not biblical.
Yeah.
There's a reason. It's a charged item, so to speak. There's some kind of an attachment there.
So that's a Celtic cross that they're using there that you described. And so they're going through with this ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. It's amazing, you know, but there's so many things like that out there that, I mean, they are literally leading people straight to hell without the people even knowing it.
Yeah.
You know,
that's the saddest part. And Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Yep. And it's true. So there will be people say, oh, I didn't know. Well, you should have known. You should have known, because if you're really making God first, then you should always thirst for knowledge.
That's right. And you know, the area where that relic has a lot of activity. There's a lot of paranormal activity in that area.
Doubt that, yeah.
You know, it's unbelievable. But you mentioned something else, and this came to mind about the frequencies.
Yeah.
Dave Mustaine, who is the lead singer for Megadeth, I think it is. I don't know. But he got saved. He says he's now a professing Christian.
I hope so, Patrick.
Yeah, I hope so too. But he said there is a demonic frequency. He said that there is one.
Well, it's a tritone. It's the devil's interval.
Yeah. And
that's been used as far back as classical musicians, violinists.
Yeah.
Paganini and people like this.
Is he the guy that they said he was like possessed and he played unbeliobly well?
Supposedly made one of those crossroad deals.
Yes.
And this was one of the greatest violin players of all time.
Yeah.
And supposedly because of the Faustian deal that he had made with the devil, and suddenly he became this, superstar and this world-renowned, even to this day. There are composers that base things off of Paganini, but it is all loaded with tritones, which is the devil's fifth, the devil's interval.
Yeah.
And we should not play those things because it's very wicked and it's very dangerous. And Mustaine is absolutely right. And again, I don't know Dave Mustaine. I know a little bit about his story. I know that he was a practicing black magician that puts spells and curses on people.
Yeah.
I pray for him
that
he's real and authentic now, that he has gotten saved and delivered. But I absolutely believe him when he talks about these types of frequencies through the tritone and how you can invoke evil through them. And I'm going to tell you, as a musician, a guitarist, I can recall years ago, many, many years ago, when I was not saved, and I played in bands and I played hard rock and heavy metal music. I can recall playing certain types of music, whether it would be Led Zeppelin's Dazed and Confused or other Jimi Hendrix type of things. I didn't know this at the time because I was not formally taught music. I learned by ear. All I was doing was mimicking sounds that I was hearing.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize is that during the Dazed and Confused guitar solo, Jimmy Page was actually performing an Aleister Crowley ritual by using a violin bow on the guitar strings.
That makes sense.
Pointing it, in all directions. He was performing a satanic ritual right there on stage every night. Nobody knew it. I didn't know it.
Yeah.
But I can tell you this: I didn't use a violin bow. I used a pick to try and mimic those sounds, and using feedback and delay, and echo and reverb.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you right now, there were some demonic things that happened in producing, because you're opening a doorway. You're giving a legal right to the devil to send demons in.
Mm-hmm.
And once they come in, they're going to create a variety of damage, because they want to kill, rob, and destroy.
That's right. And it's funny, Jimmy Page lives in Aleister Crowley's old house on Loch Ness.
Yeah.
Of all the strange things.
He is an open worshiper of the devil.
Yeah.
And Aleister Crowley. And I've spoke about this, and I continue to speak about it. Look, I don't like to say bad things about people. I love people, but the truth is the truth, and there's no substitute for it. So if I say that Jimmy Page is a Satanist, well, I say it because Jimmy has said it. Jimmy has said it in his own words. Jimmy has said it, how much he revered Aleister Crowley. And he seems to be the Pied Piper of a lot of these musicians. And this is a long rabbit hole. I've covered it before. I'll probably cover it again. But there's really been an agenda since the mid 50s to destabilize the American family, and they did it with music.
If you go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's very clear there. There's old videos. I haven't been there in many years now, but there's old videos of people, these preachers trying to warn people, and they kind of mock it. But another thing I saw there was the original lyrics of Purple Haze. And strangely enough, in the original lyrics that Jimi Hendrix wrote down, it says somewhere in there, Jesus saves.
But, that's the amazing thing. So the devil will give you a little crumb of truth, and then he'll mix all the lies in with it. So Jimi Hendrix was quoted as saying that he could mesmerize and hypnotize people with his guitar playing. And once that took place, then he could put any suggestion into the people's minds that he wanted to. He's another one that was performing a satanic ritual on stage when he burned his guitar. We could make a whole show of just listing all these performers that are open in their worship of the devil and Crowley. Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates. Daryl Hall is quoted as saying that he came from a family of ministers and preachers, and he wanted to be Aleister Crowley, the anti to them. He didn't want to do anything in their order. Therefore, he became a preacher, and his gospel was music, and he would be a preacher on the stage every night, preaching the gospel of music, which is satanic, because and people that would probably disagree with me, they're a pop group. Dig into Daryl Hall and dig into some of those lyrics, and you'll find lots of Satanism and mentions of Crowley. And another thing that the devil does, his order is order out of chaos. So everything with him is upside down and backwards. Now, Aleister Crowley preached this as well, that a man has to talk, walk, and think backwards. And this is being in perfect union with the devil.
That's right.
Hall & Oates, one song that comes to mind, Out of Touch, Out of Time. The intro to that song is a backward echo effect. Everything is in reverse. And God really made me aware of that after I got saved and after I developed my real and authentic relationship with him. He pointed that out to me, and I had to eliminate a lot of things out of my life, Patrick, and music, those types of musicians and that type of music, I had to eliminate out of my life, because these are preachers for the devil. And they are willing vessels to deceive mankind and to lead them into destruction.
That's right. Daryl Hall, actually, I heard a quote from him many years ago that he actually admitted he'd practiced the occult for years. And
you could go right on down the line, right on down the line, and you'll see entertainer after entertainer, musician after musician. Now it's athlete after athlete.
Yes.
You have athletes that are doing satanic rituals in the end zone after they, one that I saw and I talked about was the Kansas City Chiefs. This was last year. Patrick Mahomes and the gang, he threw for a touchdown, and he and the receivers and a running back, they gather in the end zone. And all of a sudden they're throwing up the Mano Coronado, the Hail Satan hand salute, and the 3-6 okey doke. That's what people think. Oh, it's 3 6s.
That's right.
And they throw that up, and then another guy standing there. It was completely ritualistic.
Yeah.
And more of these athletes, they're doing it because this is a brotherhood.
Yes.
And so you cannot be in the positions of power and influence unless you're sold out. You just can't.
That's exactly right. That's absolutely right. You know, it's funny. There was a guy made rounds in churches in the 70s named John Todd. Supposedly a former Illuminati member. His real name was Lance Collins. Then he if you follow him, he gets to a place where he kind of starts going off the rails, and then he just disappeared. But some of the things he said, I know were true.
Jail. Supposedly he died in jail.
But then you wonder, like, was he arrested on something made up? What happened? You know, but a lot of the things he said, I remember him specifically mentioning David Crosby.
Yeah.
And that's back in the 70s. And then David Crosby dies, I think it was earlier this year or late last year. Yeah. And he was saying, you know, negative things like he didn't want to go to heaven. It's overrated and all that. And then he dies like the next day.
And so Crosby, you know, he was around at 3 of these so-called super groups back in the 60s that came into the 70s. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, the Byrds.
Yeah.
What was the other one? Buffalo Springfield.
Springfield, yeah.
Yeah. And so Crosby, according to John Todd, and I believe John Todd when he said it, you know, Crosby was one of these initiated warlocks, witches, occultists.
Yep.
That and I'm convinced that if you're in that industry, you just can't be there in the high places unless you are sold out in that way to this brotherhood. Same thing for professional sports now. I don't even watch professional sports anymore. This is a scripted reality. These entertainers have to literally do things that I can't mention on this program in order to be where they are, including authorizing ritual sacrifice of loved ones. And this is how they, you know, advance and get up into the ranks. And this goes for politicians, religious figures. This goes all the way across the board. And it is now more prevalent and prominent now than ever before. And it is also becoming more in the open than ever before.
Very little is being hid. At this point, they're pretty much in our face with it. And, you know, it's funny. One of the other things about John Todd that's really interesting is clear back in the 70s, he says that his family was one of the Illuminati bloodlines and that they brought him up in witchcraft. And they said they sent him to a specific witch to teach him the dark arts or whatever. And he names the guy. He said his name was, I believe it's Raymond Buckland.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting part, Raymond Buckland is from Ohio. He lived in, it was either Holmes or Wayne County. Very popular in Holmes and Wayne County. I believe he just died not that long ago. But he had written 60 some occult books. He was a practicing witch. So it's funny that John Todd's saying all that in the 70s. And then in the early 2000s, I become aware of this guy. And it's like, oh, man, that all makes sense.
It does make sense. And again, the masses, most people, they wouldn't believe it. They wouldn't even take it in for a second because they're so brainwashed with, you know, everything in the mainstream. That they just can't perceive these things. It's foreign to them. And it's very sad. Because these very same people will buy into any, and this goes back to Jesus. Jesus said, you'll believe anybody. You won't believe me. You'll follow after everybody else, but you won't follow after me. Same thing. People don't want the truth. They want their version of. And
their eyes are blinded. And
totally blinded.
It's funny. There was a lady I interviewed a couple episodes back who showed, but she had many demons cast out of her. And the one person who was involved in the exorcism, they said that they were shown what she had and how the demons were interacting to destroy her. And she finds out later exactly what they described. She had gotten into automatic writing, and she would go to these blackout phases and write this stuff and draw pictures and all these things that she wasn't even aware of till later. She would come back to herself, and there it is.
And that's
one of the drawings
taking over.
Yeah, one of the drawings showed those exact demons the way they had been described, attacking her. It was a drawing that she did under automatic writing, and the one demon was covering her eyes.
Amazing.
And it's like, that's why their eyes are blinded.
And that's the most truth you'll ever get out of demons, because they are deceivers like the devil. And this is why I warn people when they're performing spiritual deliverances, never have a dialogue with the demon other than taking power and authority over it, commanding it to be silent, and having total control. Otherwise, if you open yourself up to a dialogue with the demon, A, they're a liar, you're not going to get truth, and B, they are going to lead you into a trap. So you have to be very, very careful.
If you listen to the original the movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I'm forgetting the young lady's name, that was a true story based on this.
I've never seen it. I heard of it, but I've never seen it.
I can't think of her name, but this young lady, it's all recorded. And the priests and the exorcisms did not work, and she died. And she had been opened up to demons through, supposedly, the Virgin Mary appeared to her and said that Jesus needs you to agree to atone for people's sins. And she agreed to. And she got possessed because of that. Jesus doesn't need it. He already did it all. He doesn't need us to do that.
Right.
But when the priests were casting out the demons, or trying to, they're doing everything except the biblical model, and they're in dialogue with the demons, not even to interrogate and make them leave. They're there. Well, what's this? All these different Catholic things that were going on. What's the Pope going to do about this or that? They're in open dialogue. It's all recorded with these demons, and it's like the demon is supposedly confirming to them that the Pope is really on the right page, and all know we're in big trouble. And it's all, they're being set up. They're being led into a trap.
Deception and madness. And I've seen these videos, Patrick, with various people out there who claim to be doing this work. And I look and I go, dear God, this is so far off the track. This guy, he's supposedly got a woman sitting there that she's demon filled, and like you just mentioned, he's doing the whole interview. He wants to know this about that and these world events and all this. And I'm thinking, this is madness. This is absolute madness that is going to lead into catastrophe for this person who claims to be delivering this woman, and for this woman as well. I think this is going to be bad all the way around.
And it can be a thing that can easily turn into pride. Because you start thinking you're done this and you're done that. It's about look, find out who they are, why they're there, and make them leave. You don't need more than that. You don't need, and sometimes you don't need all of that. It just
exactly right.
Jesus asked their names before. He asked how long it had been there to the boy that had the deaf and dumb spirit's dad. He called him by name, things like that. You don't need to get into all this other nonsense, and you're opening yourself up to being tricked.
Disaster. Absolute disaster. So, but it seems to be the popular thing now. There's a lot of people that are going around claiming, these titles, and they do this and they do that. Now, the way that, for those of you out there watching, the way that you can always pray about things, even everything that Patrick and I have talked about here, pray about it and ask God if what we're saying is true. Get confirmation from him. Don't put your trust in man in that way without getting confirmation from God. That's what you should always do. But when you're seeing some of these people out there who claim to do this and do that and be this and be that, pray about it first. And Jesus said, you will know them by their fruit. You can't make good fruit from a bad tree. That's right. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So just let God guide you, because wisdom and knowledge is power.
And God said, if you ask for wisdom, the Bible says, if you ask for wisdom, God will give it to you liberally. He'll pour it out on you. He'll give you that knowledge.
He has for me, knowledge, Patrick.
He will pour it out liberally. And even like words of knowledge during a deliverance, God will show you things sometimes, and you have no way of knowing it. And it's dead on accurate because the Holy Spirit showed you.
He's done it to me many, many times through these various deliverances, things that I would never even think of. Have suddenly manifested, and then it's like an automatic knowing, and an automatic knowing that I have to do it or say it.
Yes.
And that's part of being obedient to God as well.
Absolutely. Bill, I can't thank you enough for being on the program tonight. And I thank you for your ministry. I thank you for how you've helped me over the years too.
I'll always be there for you, brother. And I'm
I
happy
appreciate
for you.
that.
And I'm looking forward to coming back again, because we should really dig into more of these types of topics that we covered.
I would absolutely love to. Absolutely. And can you let the listeners know, about your other programs that you do, your books, kind of, let them know about where they can find your books, where they can watch your other programs.
Well, the latest book is called Tales from an Exorcist. And look, I don't even like that title, but unfortunately, the only way people can identify with what you do is to have to use that word. So
I agree.
I would prefer spiritual deliverance minister, or no title at all, to be honest with you, just somebody that God works through to help people. But that's the latest book, Tales from an Exorcist. You can get that at my site, BillJBean.com, or Amazon, wherever. Also, if you're out there and you're in need of spiritual deliverance and you're having problems, contact me. Visit BillJBean.com, BillBeanWarrior.com. You can email me directly from those sites. I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. I am overwhelmed, so busy with so many people coming to me for help, but God always helps me to find a way to manage. Yeah. And so I find that I'm doing these deliverances throughout the day, but also it could be anywhere from 11 p.m. at night up until 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning, depending on the time zone in another country. And so I just praise God for everything. I am a vessel that God works through. Therefore, it is not me or my power doing any of this. I'm thankful and honored that God would work through me in this way to help people. And I'll continue to do this for as long as he will have me to do it. So I want to thank you again, Brother Patrick, and God bless you and your family. And God bless all of you out there. Thank you for being a part of this broadcast and listening in. And I look forward to the next time.
Yes, I look forward to it too. And thank you again so much. And to the listeners, I thank you for tuning in. Again, I'm Patrick Meekin, and this is the Stranger Than Fiction podcast. And I am the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which you can pick up at Amazon.com. If you like the content, please subscribe. Please like the video and share with others. If you want to comment, feel free. But that helps us keep content coming. So thank you again for tuning in. Good night and God bless.